Today on The Global African, we'll talk about the impact of neoliberalism on black politics in the United States. That's Today on The Global African. I'm your host, Bill Fletcher. Thanks for joining us again. I'm not a businessman. I'm a businessman. Our next guest argues that this Jay-Z lyric summarizes a shift in black politics over the last several decades. Neoliberalism, the idea that the market knows best, has dominated our system of economics as well as our politics. Individuals are being made to think of themselves as brands responsible for developing their own human capital. Hallowed institutions like schools and churches increasingly behave like businesses, prioritizing market values like production and efficiency. This is all in an era where, non-coincidentally, we are facing historically high levels of income inequality. On this segment, we're going to look at neoliberalism's effect on black politics and pop culture, as well as the politics of hustling. So stay tuned. We're joined by Professor Lester Spence. Professor Spence is an associate professor of political science and Africana studies at Johns Hopkins University. He specializes in the study of black, racial, and urban politics, and is the author of the recently published book, Knocking the Hustle, Against the Neoliberal Turn in Black Politics, and that's what we're going to be addressing today. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Absolutely. Welcome back.
It's good to be here. It's really good to be here.
So I'm excited about this book. But let's start with terms, because in most of the rest of the world, people understand the term neoliberalism. In the United States, for a variety of reasons, people don't.
Yeah. So when I'm talking about neoliberalism, or when most of the rest of the world talks about neoliberalism, what they're talking about is kind of a set of institutional arrangements, public policies, and kind of common sense ideas that proposes that the market be the standard by which every institution and every aspect of human life be organized around, right? Mm-hmm. So when I'm talking about this to brothers and sisters, to black brothers and sisters, the term I'll use, or the line I use, is from Diamonds from Sierra Leone. The remix with Kanye West and Jay-Z, and he has a line in there where he says, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a business man. Watch me handle my business." Damn. Is that idea that individuals should try to structure their lives to be as entrepreneurial as possible and to become something akin to enterprises. Similarly, if you look at schools, churches, governments, the idea is that they should be structured like businesses, right?
So it's the destruction of any real notion of society.
It's the destruction of what we think of as a society, and it's the destruction of the concept of the public, right? The whole idea of a public good kind of falls out.
So, we can think about people like Milton Friedman, the economist, is one of the architects of that. What about in Black America? What happened? What are you focusing on that took place in Black America?
So what happens in general, like around late 60s, early 70s, the world economy in developed countries basically falls out or bottoms out. And a whole set of policies that basically provided for a safety net in the United States and other countries, those policies get posed as having caused the problem. So what we need are a new suite of policies that basically get people to take responsibility for their own stuff. Welfare is replaced by workfare. Supply side economics, or the idea that we need to significantly cut taxes, that we need to restructure governments, that we need to make cities more entrepreneurial. That gets rolled out. That happens at the same time that we see African Americans in the United States case actually gain a suite of rights, and they take control of cities like Detroit, Washington, D.C., Gary, but the bottom falls out of those cities, right? Like the moment Black people take power is the moment that these policies begin to be rolled out. And in fact, in some ways, because black people take power, they can be used as the excuse for why we need kind of neoliberal policies. And now black people in the United States are in a lot of ways just like people in the United States in general. So some of the same forces that cause the neoliberal turn to take hold in America, United States broadly, takes hold in black communities in the same way. And you see it in the actions and ideas of many of the first and really the second and third wave of black mayors. You see it in the growth of the prosperity gospel in black church communities, and you see it in a few other places as well.
Explain, because our audience is global, prosperity, prosperity theology. What is that?
So the prosperity gospel basically takes the Bible and transforms it into an entrepreneurial self-help guide. And the idea being is that if you follow the line, if you follow the Bible, if you follow the precepts of Jesus in the New Testament, not only will you be spiritually wealthy, but you will be materially wealthy. Right.
So it's a 21st century version of like Daddy Grace and
yes.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important. Thank you for bringing that, because the thing is even though it's neoliberalism, the neo implying new, a number of these ideas are ideas that are recirculating. They're not circulated in exactly the same way. The 21st century isn't just 1920 warmed over, but those elements are very similar.
So the neoliberal economics or neoliberal project, as implemented in Black America, do you see that as having that essentially defeated the prior, let's call it the civil rights reformer agenda? Is that basically what happens?
No, I would actually argue that it kind of infects it, right?
Explain what
So if we think about the neoliberal project as a class project, and that's what it is kind of broadly, right? But focusing on it as a specific class project in the United States among black people, and actually being exported other places. There's an element of the civil rights project that was about reducing racial discrimination. But if you think about where those gains are really concentrated, they're really concentrated amongst black folk who are highly educated, black folk who are professional, black folk like me. And in as much as that neoliberal class project is about kind of enhancing the ability of of folk in that top 10%, top 15% to kind of live lives, it's easy to articulate kind of a neoliberal civil rights project that suggests that that we should concentrate, we should give black people who already have the capacity to be entrepreneurial more resources for them to do so, and then cut people who can't pull their pants up, right? Or people who can't stop having babies or whatever. You cut them off. You cut them off like at the knees.
There was a very provocative point that you make in discussing this book, and I smiled when I read it. You said that this book is both a response to Cornel West's Race Matters and David Harvey's Brief History of Neoliberalism. And of course, Race Matters was a very popular book when it came out. And Cornel is associated with anti-poverty, progressiveness, whatever. But you have a critique. You have a very deep critique. Yeah,
and I had this critique back when I was a kid, right? So Race Matters, really quickly, what it does, what it's really good at doing, it's a really, really, really short book, right? And within that short book, it communicates a lot of dense ideas about black leadership, about black politics, et cetera, right? And I wanted to see if I could do that with good politics. The challenge with that book, there are a couple of challenges. One challenge is what he articulates as the most important problem facing black America is black nihilism. This is right after the Rodney King riots, right?
Explain what black nihilism, what does that mean?
Oh, black nihilism is basically the pervasive loss of love like kind of self-love in Black communities that comes basically after kind of the post and after the bottom falls out of the economy, starting in the 70s, taking shape in the 80s and the Reagan, what we used to call the Reagan-Bush era. Now the challenge, so one way to think about it being trifling is that Black nihilism as an intellectual idea has done more harm to Black people than crack. Right? In that
it's a provocative point.
If you argue, you know, what are the politics that come as a result of arguing that in the wake of the LA rebellion, this most significant problem with Black people is that we don't kind of love ourselves enough. The politics that come from that is the politics of therapy, right? Instead of the politics of organizing. Right? And as far as analyzing where our problems are when we're analyzing, we're not analyzing political economy, we're not taking institutions seriously, we're not talking about the structural forces that's decimated unions, that's brought the red line into the 21st century. We're not talking about any of that stuff. What we're talking about is what do we have to do to, you know, where is the love, right? Like that old school song, where is the love, right? So that's what I wanted to, that was my response to Cornel West. Now on the other side, you have David Harvey. And David Harvey, his work on neoliberalism is really, really, really important. It's incredibly important. But if you read that book, right, there's no mention of racial politics in there. And you can't talk about the turn towards neoliberalism in the United States at the very least without talking about racial politics. It's not possible, right? It's not that class creates the conditions for racial politics. It's that class and racial politics work together. There's a reason why whites who suffer tremendously from the neoliberal turn consistently vote for it, right?
Right.
And Harvey totally ignores that. So I wanted to kind of talk about the way racial politics creates the conditions by which the neoliberal turn can take place, but then drill down deep in what this means for Black politics, right? And then the responses that Black people have to make that already take for granted that Black people kind of love one another.
Let me ask one other question, and I actually have many other questions, but I can only ask one, and that has to do with the way this book has been published. You did not go to an academic press.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about how and why you made that decision and what the publisher's thinking is?
Yeah, so I went with Punctum Press. Punctum is a small, radical press, independent, and it has really, really liberal digital rights management. So for those of you who are interested, if you know, right now it's gonna cost like $5 for the PDF, and you can give that PDF away, and then in 6 months, the PDF will be free. Right? Because I'm writing this book to get the ideas out, right? I'm not writing this book to get massive honorarium checks. We're in a moment now where you can get massively paid for this type of stuff. I'm not writing this book to, you know, I wanted to see if I could kind of take the writing of the book and the publishing of the book as a political project. Right, so thinking about the academic aspects. I'm a card-carrying academic. I don't consider myself a scholar activist. That's another term I have a problem with. Scholarship matters, right? But the question is how do we create more space for the types of political work that needs to be done within political science, within sociology, right? So to a certain extent, this is also an academic experiment. That is, if I can publish this and actually get academic benefits from it, then that increases the capability of some assistant professor who comes behind me or some kid who's thinking about graduate school to actually do the same thing, right? Because too often with tenure becomes kind of a golden noose, so to speak, and it kind of truncates your ability to think broadly, because once you get tenure, you tend to want to just reproduce the stuff that the academy wants, right? And I wanted to see if I could do something that traveled broadly, to write something that created more space within the academy, and then something that wasn't necessarily about me, me getting paid. That's not really what this project is about.
Dr. Spence, thank you for joining us. And this is, I'm really looking forward to this getting out. because this is one of the central debates that we've got to have in Black America, and all too often we shy away from it. So I want to thank you very much for not only joining us, but for doing this.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been dope.
Thank you very much for joining us for this segment of The Global African. I'm your host, Bill Fletcher. We'll be back in a moment.